Okay, go for it.
All right, great. Thank you, Matt. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our April 12th budget workshop. Prior to this, we were in executive session where we were going over contract negotiations. So at this time at 7:14, I'd like to call the meeting to order. Julie, would you do roll call, please?
For Barbara Dayton.
Here.
Dave Conlon.
Here.
Tim Frazier.
Here.
Pat Braban.
Here.
Amy Rivera.
Here.
Okay, thanks, Julie. And if Matt, you could put up a flag and we will all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you very much. I was just hustling around trying to find the agenda here, but there's really only one thing on the agenda, and that is the PowerPoint that Mike Henry has prepared and our subsequent questions about the budget. So, Mike, do you want to go ahead?
All right, if John can get that started for me, that'd be great. All right. Again, like last year, we're going to present this with a 5-year projection and giving you all the details of both the appropriations, the revenue side, and the ultimate tax levies for each of those 5 years. Next screen there, John. All right. We continue to experience the effects of the worldwide COVID pandemic. The ever-changing CDC guidance impacts the delivery of instruction, staffing, transportation, and health and safety. The most recent guidance came out on April the 9th, 2021, and still calls for schools to maintain 3 to 6 feet of social distancing and recommends the continuation of cohorting of students. Masks and MERV filters are also required, which continue to impact our budget. We've established a set of assumptions in an effort to roll budgets forward and project out to 2025-26 fiscal year. And just like last year, the major items of our budget include wages and salaries, employee benefits, non-resident tuition, and debt service. Those are the big hitters. All right, this first screen, I don't know why, John, the right column seems to be off the screen. Is there any way to bring that over to the left? Can everybody see the full screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. All right. So this is, you've seen this chart before. This is our 2021 school year, current enrollment, number of sections, average class size, and then the 21-22 school year's projected enrollments, number of sections, and the average class sizes as well. So currently we've got a grand total of students between the ones here at Spring School, the high school kids, the other tuitioned students to other district, to BOCES and residential. And then we've got a bunch of students that are going to either private or parochial schools. So we're responsible for 1,051 for this year, and it is projecting to look like 1,060 for next year. Wages and salaries. The largest category in this grouping is our teachers, and you can see how it's going to spread out over the next 5 years. Where it's at today, the original budget was $8,038,000 on the teachers. Our adjusted budget was $8,179,000, which may end up being adjusted again as we get closer to year end. We start seeing salaries and wages in all of these categories. We may have to shift some things around through budget transfers. TAs and monitors have stayed fairly flat at about $1,018,000 on budget to budget. And administrative and support, has gone down just a little bit from 2,264,000 to 2,252,000. You can see in 21, 22 what we're projecting. We're looking at one of the things I think that's why we're looking at a little bit lower number in that TA aides, monitors, nurses is, remember, for 21, 22, we have both of our nurses have, Deb Girardi is retiring, and what Tara Gurney is also leaving. So we're losing those two salaries. And when you figure Deb has been here for a long time, so her salary is high up on the charts as far as the steps go on the TA's bargaining unit. At this point, any questions you have on the salaries and wages and salaries? We should just go on. All right, next slide is the employee benefits, breaking out Social Security, the state retirement, health and student insurance, workers' comp, life insurance, unemployment insurance, the flexible benefits plan administration cost, and then other employee allowances. And they pretty much track year after year between 39 and 41% of what the total salaries are. So they're still pretty much tracking along those lines. Next screen, John. Here's the non-resident tuitions. I've got it broken out like I did last year between the high school. So we're going from 8.6 million in 2021 up to 9.17 million, 9.2. It should be roughly a 2% increase year after year. Our other public schools, we did budget for 471,000. We're not going to spend the full amount. We did lose, I guess, one or two students out of that category. And we're seeing lower numbers going out into 21, 22, a little bit of a pickup in 22, 23, and 23 and going out. And we've got the head counts for the students going to East Hampton High School. So you have the regular ed students currently at 295 students, the hybrid, as we call them, 25 students that require some additional services, and then the special ed students at 15. We're anticipating next year dropping by about 7 total students. And then after that, we're just using an average to kind of forecast what the head counts are going to be in the future years. All right, next slide. This one's a busy slide. It may be difficult for a lot to see, but if you recall last year, I had a similar slide for the bonds, and we had a bunch of scenarios, and but the bottom line here, what struck me as I was putting this together today, is our interest costs. It's 3.7, almost $3.8 million over the life of the bond. And last year, that interest cost was more than double what this amount is. And that's largely because we were able to cut down the interest rates considerably. Last year, I think we were running about an average of about 3%, 3.25% on the bonds. And as you can see here, the interest rates on each layer, it's 1% on each layer from 2022, 23 school year out to the 28, 29 school year. And then after that, those layers are at 2% interest rates. So there was a considerable amount of savings from what we projected last year once we went out. That's one of the big reasons why I had recommended so strongly last August or July that the timing was right to issue those bonds, because the rates were at probably the lowest they've ever been. And I've got in here the fair market value, what the average increase or the average rate is. So like if you've got a house that's an average fair market value, let's say $589,655, the cost of these bonds is on the average is about $138.80 per year on top of the regular tax levies for everything else we have to do. So just to give you an idea of how much the bond is going to cost in the tax levy going forward. Next slide, John. And here's a summary of the debt service. I've broken it up so you have your bus debt, the first group, the capital projects, and you can see where 21-22, we're going to pick up 429,000 on which is interest only. And then 22-23, we're going to start picking up principal and interest. Interest in 21-22 is a full year's interest in one shot. But then after that, September 1st of 2021, interest payments will be semi-annual. So one piece in September and next piece in March. And you see there that the middle school addition, we're getting to the end of the life on that. So after 22-23, that bond will be completely paid for. And we'll see some budget-to-budget savings as a result of that, while the new capital project is going to run a little bit around $1 million per year in debt service. Some years it'll be a little bit higher, especially later on, than it is in the earliest years. And the other piece of debt service is every year we borrow $6 million to tide us over until tax collection begins in the form of a tax anticipation note, commonly known as a TAN. And the interest rates basically are shown here. That's only interest that we're repaying on those TANs. So that's the expenditure side of it. Next slide. All right, now we get into the 5-year look ahead on the appropriations only, broken into the major categories: salaries and wages, employee benefits, tuition expenditures, BOCES, debt service, interfund transfers, textbooks, library materials, and computer software, equipment codes. And we've got, again, last year we put aside $250,000 to start the year for COVID expenditures. This year we're looking at about $162,500. Next year, $100,000, and then $50,000. So I'm anticipating it to start to dwindle down. We've got all of the contractual or purchased services, and the last category is supplies. And you can see that the increases from budget to budget. This year it's 4.12%. Next year I'm anticipating a 3.31% budget to budget increase, a 3.42 after that, and so on. So that's the expenditure side of the budget. All right, next, John. Here are all of the revenue components. You've got state aid, and you can see right now the $1,809,000 in state aid. This is the final run that came out early April. Does not include any of the funding for the different pandemic, the 1.4 million or the 743,000 pandemic adjustment. I did get a letter today from the state education department that instructs us, which is what my philosophy had been, is because we have to fill out and apply for the grants for those amounts of money, it all has to be accounted for in the special aid fund. But it does allow us to transfer expenditures, which I've built into the expenditure equation, to move some of the money over into the special aid fund to help keep the expenditures as a whole a little bit more reasonable with regard to figuring out what our tax levies are going to be for the outgoing years. Our pilots, we had budgeted for this year, 105,000. Found out that the pilots did increase to 127,000 and change. So you'll see that 127 now being carried out into the future years. Interest income, we don't earn a lot of interest income. Medicare reimbursements, that's been holding fairly steady, that we do get reimbursed for the Medicaid on some of the services that we do fund and provide. And it's been holding pretty steady at around that 75,000 mark. And then we always have an allotment of other revenues, which includes various donations and things like that come in. Fund balance, you can see here the appropriated piece of fund balance. It was $1,031,000 for this year. I'm using $1,073,000 of it for next year. And after that, I'm looking at a couple of bumps up that are going to put us into that 1.6, 1.4 million and 1.33 million going out. Every year we do use ERS reserve and repair reserve as another avenue within the appropriated fund balance to help fund and balance our budget at $100,000 for each of those. So taking the expenditures from the last screen, subtracting out the total other revenues and the total appropriations from fund balance is how we come up with what the levy that's going to be needed in order to balance this budget. And that's what the yellow line is the tax levies necessary to balance the budget. The blue line is what the increase from the prior year levy is. And down at the bottom, you see the percent budget increase is anticipated. No. Oh, that's the total budget of change between years for the total, basically the total budget. So we're balanced. So the actual levies that I'm looking at show it 2.61 for 21-22. Next year, I'm looking at 1.6, then it jumps to 4.52, 2.59. And now on the next screen, you're going to see how that factored out with what the tax cap going out is. So here you've got the anticipated levies from the prior page. And then the second line is the calculated estimated tax caps that go along with each one of those years. And that green line, it says, okay, tells me that every one of those years, the anticipated tax levy is going to be below the calculated tax cap. And at the bottom, you see the tax levy estimates for each of those years, taking the anticipated tax levy for the assessed value. I'm using the most recent assessed value for the community as a whole, but for each of those different house values, 589,000, 786,000, 982,000, you can see what the school tax bill would be for the year. So 21-22, we're going to be going from $3,796 to $3,898, almost $99 for the $786,000 fair market value home. 5,061, it goes up to 5,198, and the 982,000 fair market value is going to go from 6,327 to 6,498. All right, next screen is, all right, important dates to remember is we have to have the approved property budget and property tax card adoption by April the 26th. Our budget hearing is scheduled for May 11th to the public. And then the annual vote is on May 18th this year. And that should do it. The next slide is just a slide that says questions. So that was a short and sweet presentation of the budget. You received a bunch of documents over the weekend yesterday from Deb. I sent to Deb and she reviewed it and forwarded it to the board, which has a lot of other details in there. So I guess we can open it up to any questions or concerns.
Okay, thanks, Mike. So who, board members, who has questions that they'd like to go over?
I have a question, Mike. If you could go back to the slide before the question one. Let's go back.
Dates?
No, the next
one before that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So explain to me a little bit about why there's such a difference between the middle range market value and the high range market value as far as
again, when you look at your tax bill, the house values throughout Springs are all over the place. Everybody's got an assessed value.
Right.
So the low market value has the lower assessed value, and all of our taxes are based on what your assessed value is. There's a rate that we come up with, and we apply that rate to the assessed value. I put in here the fair market value because the ordinary homeowner has a general idea of what their fair market value is. So it helps give them a little bit of an idea of where their tax bill might lay. So when you're looking at a fair market value, your houses are taxed based on the value of the home, again, through the assessed values. So the bigger the house you have, the higher the assessed value, the more tax you're going to pay. And that's just the way the state of New York has the real property taxes set up
And
just
I'm
in
so
general.
sorry, Mike, you're saying that these numbers there are reflecting the assessed value or reflecting the amount of taxes that someone should expect to pay?
It's the amount of, the dollar amounts under each of the years and each of the columns represents the estimated tax bill that a person who has a house with an estimated fair market value of 589,000, that first line across, those each year, those are what we're estimating the tax bill to be on those homes.
Or the school portion of those?
The school portion only, not the town, not the village, not the county. None of that's added, not the libraries. The library's not even included here. Then a house with an estimated fair market value of 786,000, which is a little bit pricier house, probably a little bit bigger. They're going to pay a little bit more in taxes, and it starts with the $5,061.60 and works out as you see along that line year by year. And the last category I use, and again, these are just ballpark estimated values. I tried to do last year, come up with an average based on a different groupings to kind of come up with where the bulk of the houses fit. Again, it's, it's almost, in a way, it's a little bit arbitrary what you use as a fair market value, but it's just the idea to give you a gauge of what you might be able to expect your tax bill to look like come December when the tax bills come out. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I really like it because it gives people an idea of what they can look forward to, or maybe they might look at it that way, but what they can see that again, this is gradually as we move through the process, that every year, if taxes go up and we stay underneath the cap, this is what they can expect pretty much to pay over the next 5 years. I think it's great to have that kind of projection so people can see not just a year at a time. And it makes a lot of sense to show.
And I think the other thing too is a lot of people are looking to have zero tax increases, but with all of the different things that we have to incur contractually, salary increases based on contracts, health insurance increases based on a contract, tuition contracts, they're all going up by at least 2% in most cases. So there's almost no way, unless we get some donor to donate a ton of money to the district, that we can't have tax increases year after year after year. The whole trick to this is trying to keep it under the cap.
Mike, I just think these numbers look a little low here in terms of what you're predicting for people's tax portion, because I happen to have my tax bill out, and as I'm looking at just the school portion, it's higher than what those are. So
what is your assessed value?
You don't want to say that publicly.
Maybe.
Do I need to say that right now? Anyway,
No.
I'm just concerned about my...
If you'd like, you want to stop or email it over to me, I'll take a look at it and let you know how it filters in here.
Right. Well, I just want to make sure that we're being accurate in what we're putting
Barbara,
out.
so how, without giving out the assessed number, how close is Mike's number to the number he has up there? Is he 1% off, 10% off? Say, no, without giving the assessed value, what's the percentage he's off?
I'm not sure. I'll just send that to Mike tomorrow and he can have
and I'll take a look at it and let you know, Barbara. That's easy enough to do.
And then, if you would just check that out before you want to post this on the website or anything, sure that's accurate. That would be
and think about it. If you had a house that was about, say, roughly $1.5 million fair market value, it'd be almost double the $786,000 line. So instead of 5,000, or next year 5,198, you'd have 10,400 roughly would be the tax bill for that house. Does that make sense?
yes.
Yeah, because it will be related to the values.
Mike, another way to do this might just be to show the increase. So you know how you have...
We had that on one of the previous screens, I think.
So...
Was it this one? No.
The increase in the tax, in their
I
tax...
have noticed the increase was just on the bond.
So
Right, go back to that other one, John.
Yeah, I think it was one of our teachers who said, "Oh, it looks like it's $130 or $170." That
that sounds about right.
So that's another way of showing it rather than putting out the actual,
John, if you could go to the next screen, that'd be good. Yeah, because like the middle one, the 786, you're going to be going up by about $137 for the year. 5198 minus 5061 is about $137.
so that might be another way to show it,
Yeah.
Mike.
Okay.
I feel that's what you usually do. You usually show like a dollar increase over what your current taxes are. I think that's.
You know what? I think that shows better in the next presentation, which is the adoption one, because we get a little bit more detail, nitty gritty in the assessed values and things like that, where we can show the dollar increase based on different fair market value estimates. Now, anybody that's in real estate, if they can give me some better fair market value numbers to work with that are more reasonable, I'll be happy to change that out. I just need the assessed values to go along. Oh, I can calculate the assessed values. We have an equalization rate of 0.0058. Multiply that by the 589,655, and that's the assessed value for that particular line.
So other than this issue, does anybody have any other questions about where things are in the budget at this time?
Mike, I want
Nice and clear.
Mike, I was looking at the slide here on the 5-year summary on that page. I don't know if you want to pull it up. For
Which one?
The one where you have
Appropriation, revenue.
let me see here. The budget summary of revenues and fund balance. Is that even on?
Next one, John. 12. Yeah. Is the revenue projection that one?
Yeah. Right there. So for 23-24, you're looking at a tax levy anticipated on that one at 4.5, and then you seem to say you seem confident that's still under the tax cap. Can you just talk about that a little bit and explain how that works, and then how, because that is the big year there.
Yeah. Well, part of the problem with the 23-24 year is these special grants that we're getting totaling 2.2 million.
Yeah.
We're going to be using as much of that as we can to keep our expenditure piece down. So we'll be able to take advantage of that for 2021, 21-22, and 22-23. 23-24, that's going to be a year where if we've got some staff and other people in there that you want to keep, they're going to come back into the general fund. So that's why you see a bit of a bump up in the expenditure side of the budget, creating that 4.52% increase. Now, when I calculated out the tax cap, it takes last year's levy, adds to whatever the calculated rate comes out. Because remember, the changes in our debt service are exclusions to the tax cap. So they adjust up and down the tax cap itself. So by the time we hit 23-24, we're going to be actually hitting into full interest payments and principal payments on the capital project bond that we just issued this past year. So you're going to see a bit of a bump up there as well. That's why it allows us to go a little bit higher on the tax cap calculation, because we do have more debt service to allow us to go a little bit higher, and that this tax levy actually will be below the tax cap, even though it looks high, 4.52%. I think if we go to the next slide there, John, number 13. You could see that 23-24, the anticipated levy is 29,455, and the calculated tax cap will be 29,517. So the margin is very slim at that point, but we're just under the cap. We'll be just barely under the cap.
So
I was taking all of these to the maximum of the caps,
right,
going out beyond next year.
So I mean, I don't know if you got. I sent you an email the other day about.
I did see it. I didn't have a chance to really.
No,
go
that's
through
okay. It was kind of.
Though.
Well, no, it was kind of like a general, there were like general points.
Yeah, yeah.
A lot of it wasn't like, but, you know, one of the main things I brought up was the idea that, you know, a lot of this is time limited, funds that we seem to be getting from state and fed.
Right.
So, you know, it's kind of like trying to come up with the best approach, because that money is not going to be a continuous stream that we're going to be able to take advantage of. It's kind of to what you were just talking about with 23, 24, where everything dries out. So
Yep.
it's, you know, it's really, I was just trying to prompt you about, is this the way we're handling it? Does that seem to be the best way to use these funds now? Because we obviously don't want to get our caught, you know, with our pants down in
Yeah.
23, 24, 24, 25, and so on, because, you know, we're getting this, you know, these big monies that are coming in.
Yeah. Well, one of the things, Deb and I had this conversation today, is we do have a lot of staff that are getting up there in age and stuff. And there could be, coming down the road in 2, 3, 4 years, a lot of retirements. And one of the retirements, you're losing a higher salary and be able to pick up a lower salary. So you may start seeing some cost savings out there, which will help the situation in 23, 24 and going out, as you said, that we're not getting caught with the big hits in expenditures out then. But again, we don't know what our population, our enrollments are going to be. So, I mean, it changes almost daily and weekly on us. So, you know, we're trying to best smooth this out as best that we can in order to make any increases that we see going out in the future not such a big bite to the taxpayers of the community.
So, Mike, regarding the stimulus money that we got, and Deb had said there's a list of how the money can be used. So how are we using that money this year, that chunk that we found out that we got?
Well, one of the things is, and I know there's been some discussion about some of the technology and some of the equipment for some of the renovated spaces and the new building that weren't included in the capital project. We could actually use some of that stimulus money to fund those items. So I had done a calculation, and unfortunately, I know the list I had sent you, several lines seem to be missing from the list that I'm going to have to reproduce the list for you. But it was about $114,000 in equipment and supplies needed for the art room, the phys ed room, the OT room, the science lab, some new office furniture in the assistant principal's office. The principal, you know, if you recall, Erica Sal did not have a desk. Well, Christine feels more comfortable working at a desk, which we have to get her a desk, you know, stuff like that. So we're going to be picking that stuff up using some of the stimulus money. We can also offset a lot of salaries with the stimulus money to enrich some of the people are concerned about the students with the pandemic, that they've lost some time and they've probably lost groundwork. Well, we can get more teachers involved and hire some people to help those students get back on track. So there's money we can use for that. There's a list of, I don't know, it's got to be about 15 to 20 different categories of items that we could actually use the stimulus money to support our education. And another big area is improving things like HVAC systems in the building. You know, maybe getting the window air conditioning units out and putting something more efficient in place of it. Upgrading perhaps the unit ventilators, things like that could be used. The pandemic, those grants can be used for.
So my question then, so we have those amounts in the budget to be part of the general operating expense, but if they get covered by the stimulus money, then how does that work?
I've already accounted for some of it. I've already reduced some of our expenses by that. That's why, like, if you looked at like the salaries in some of the other areas in 23, 24, you'll see some spikes up in the expenses.
Okay. Is there
Because
anything we can't use that stimulus money for?
they don't recommend using it for long-term positions, long-term recurring expenses. They'd rather you use it for health, safety, basically one-time or, you know, maybe over a 2-year period types of expenses that you're going to incur quick, you know, early on in order to get things squared away and fixed up to make the learning environment better for the kids. I know a big area they're talking about is all of the technology types of things. So, you know, they want to beef it up. They want to make sure that every student has a computer or a Chromebook. They have Wi-Fi access, things like that, not just in the building, but they're talking about even at home.
Well, can we use part of it to pay down some of our debt service for our interest this year, since that, you know, all that is on top of the tax cap, and that's sort of making, giving us a bigger percentage overall this year?
I don't know if that is going to qualify under this pandemic rules, because that's that was a voter approved contract going out for 20 years. And we're going to incur principal and interest over 20 years on that. So, you know, we've already got the voter approval authorization to assess the additional tax levy to cover that cost already. If we take it out of here.
What I'm saying is, if we just pay like part of the interest for this year due to, you know, this being a tough year for a lot of people.
It's something we can look at. I don't have the answer to that entirely. My gut tells me I don't know that we can, but we can look into it certainly.
I mean, we talk about wanting to be mindful to our taxpayers and, you know, really trying not to, you know, making sure our budget has just what it needs in there. And honestly, with the way the tax cap works, we really have like just what it needs. I don't think we have any extravagant expenses in our budget.
Right.
We know we don't want to cut things down because of what's going to happen to the budget going forward. You don't want to cut too low, then you can't meet the budget and you have to do that. So the only part of the budget that we have that, you know, would be this extra outside of the general fund, which is all our contractual, you know, the debt service that we had. And that would be, to me, that would be the only way we might possibly be able to alleviate.
Well, I think in a lot of the other contractual codes, supply codes, salary codes, all of the other ones above, I think there's places we can reclass, pardon me, some of the expenses over to the special aid fund and take it out of the general fund, which basically does the same thing you're trying to accomplish, but by looking at the debt service. But I'm not looking at just the debt service. I'm sprinkling it over everything else. I'm not going to touch textbooks because that's a categorical aid. We have to spend the money to get the aid. If I move it to the special aid fund and it's paid by a grant, I can't get aid on it too. Same thing with library materials and the computer software. I know a question always comes up about the computer hardware, which is an aidable item. However, Springs has the unfortunate circumstance of having lower income wealth below 1, but higher land wealth, which gives you a combined wealth ratio of 1. It's up there like around 2, meaning we're not eligible to get computer hardware aid as a result, because the combined wealth ratio is too high.
Right. But, you know, as we're looking ahead to those other years, when you're looking at 23, 24, I feel like we wouldn't want to cut anything more out of the actual budget right now because of that very slim margin that we're going to have down the road.
But again, a lot can happen between now and then. This is not from 22, 23 out. It's not locked in stone. It's just a ballpark forecast estimate, you know?
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, and it could change the whole
tight that year. So
yeah.
I think we got to always look for opportunities to slow the rate of the growth of the budget over the next 5 years. So I appreciate what Barbara said. I don't know if that's possible, but I mean, I was thinking about with this money that we've gotten, sometimes it makes, you know, I know, Mike, you mentioned like hiring staff and stuff. I mean, I would stay away from like the health and safety staff, you know, I would say stay away from stuff like that, because that says to me that, you know, those would be positions then going forward in 23, 24 and so on. Those are positions, maybe if you're keeping them, you got to somehow fund them. Whereas, you know, strangely, like a week or two ago, I was thinking, well, you know, supplies and equipment, things like that, technology, you know, especially with the new space that we have, let's not do it all in one shot when all these new classrooms are going to open, but in a strange way, you know, using this aid, this money that we have that only for a short period of time, sometimes using it towards some of that might actually make sense because, you know, you're not adding staff, but you're doing things that we need to do as a district, especially for those new classrooms and things like that. I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly how I built this model to forecast it out, is trying to maximize the advantage of the different grants that we have at our disposal to help offset a lot of the impact of the tax levy to the taxpayers by just reclassifying various expense categories, fitting them into the right cubby holes. Again, I know that one of the documents I did read is the intent of these grants is not to lower the tax levies per se, but to help support and improve where you need improvements in your health and safety of your building, like if you wanted to do some more with HVAC systems, new doors, new windows in other places that you haven't already done. These are one-time kind of expenses that you're going to need the money to do the work, and then move on. So that's what we've had in mind here when we tried to put this thing together, is trying to build it out with that in mind.
Okay, so you're saying part of the point of the stimulus money is to go out there and spend it and stimulate the economy. Is that part of this, what this stimulus money is?
Well, it's trying to make improvements around your building, or improvements to help the students
Right.
get back on track, really, is what the bottom line of this is supposed to be for.
So Barbara, the board approved extra help in the morning. That's something that Mike can now code to the stimulus money, which we didn't have before. The extra E&L staff, because we couldn't cohort. The extra point, whatever it was, for special ed teacher, because we couldn't commingle our kids. This is all stuff that Mike and I are actually going to sit tomorrow and look at what we can charge to the stimulus money, which will then give you money in the fund balance. And then that fund balance, as you know, can help do some of your reserves, especially the repair reserve. I think that's really important for, once this new building comes online, you're really going to see the other areas of the building that need to be renovated, whether it's, as Mike said, the univents. We've got the MERV filters, but some of the univents may need to be replaced down the road. You need to build up that repair code. Next Monday, you will have BBS go over the 5-year building survey, and you will see some of the other things that they've identified that may need to be taken care of. And the stimulus money may be able to take some of those things and take care of it right away, and others you will forecast out over 5 years to do the repairs. We're recommending the current staffing going forward. You saw the class enrollments, because we do not know what September is going to look like. Yes, the CDC and the Department of Health have said you can go down to 3 feet. But reality is, when those children take off their mask and eat, they're supposed to be at 6 feet. So you're still going to need space in a classroom to do that. And that's why we were very careful to maintain our current staffing for next year. Depending on enrollment, you may not need to rehire when somebody retires. This year, we're not replacing our 2 teachers that are retiring. That was a cost savings to the district. And it still doesn't impact class size by doing that.
Thanks, Deb. Does anyone else on the board have questions about the budget at this time?
Nice job, Mike. Thank you.
Should we
Thank
ask
you.
questions about like real detailed, like the formatted, numbers, and get real specific, or is we kind of just want to go over what the slides Mike just kind of went over with us?
Oh, I mean, this is a work session, so this is where we should talk about
Yeah,
it.
if you've got questions, I think you should be asking them.
Yep.
All right, let's see here. So if you, I don't know if you want to bring it up, I actually have the, like the central data systems, Mike.
Yeah,
I can't remember what. You said it looked like there might be some long-term savings with that expense for the next budget. I think it was like 136,000.
Well, that 136 was the state aided hardware code, which is usually used to replace different switches, Chromebooks, things like that. But included in that 136 was $40,000 for Promethean boards to go into some of the new classrooms. And we've got a bunch, we've got the tech lab, we've got the science lab, we've got a few other classrooms. So we're putting some money in there for some of those Promethean boards. That's a one-shot deal. You're going to have it this year, but you're not going to have it next year. Usually we have around $100,000 every year that we put in there just for various computer hardware kinds of needs. Like I said, including the Chromebooks and switches that might go bad, or occasionally a file server that we might have to replace.
Okay.
If you notice, we did get additional aid. And most of that additional aid was BOCES. Since Mike and I have come to spring school, we have been trying to purchase services through BOCES because we get aid on it. Yes, there's an administrative fee, but even after you deduct the administrative fee, we're still ahead of the game. And this year's BOCES aid is based on previous years. It's not based on this past year. It's based on the year before. So we're already seeing the kind of fruits of our labor from doing that. LICN, our technicians, are through BOCES. Our public relations firm is through BOCES. Pat, you mentioned that maybe we should go through BOCES for our CIO, someone to take care of our data. Security, we went through BOCES for that security data person, because if we go down or we get hacked, you need to have that support system in place, because time is of the essence to get back up and running. So those are the types of things that we've been putting under BOCES, and they have been providing a really good service, especially for a small school district. We're staying under the guidance of the state. We're in compliance. We're checking our boxes, but that's because, BOCES has the staff to help us do that. And I appreciate, Pat, you bringing that to our attention, and we have been looking at some of those areas to go through BOCES.
Let's see here. Hey, Mike, transportation. I think it was the non-instructional for the, it went from 791 to 935 for the 21-22 budget.
This is a salary code, the 1600?
It's the 5510.160.
Yeah, that's all the bus driver salaries. It's Marion's salary, all lumped in there.
It's just it's a big jump from 521 to 643. Well, it's one of the questions. It's one of the questions I asked. So
let me
just circle back. Yeah, circle back to that.
Dave, don't forget, we have a full complement of drivers this year. In the past, we have been short drivers. So you've always had them quote in the budget.
That's true.
You
Yeah.
may not have expended the money. I'm going to keep knocking on wood. Right now, we have a full complement of drivers. We lost one, and we may have another one being trained that I'll bring forward to you at the next, regular board meetings.
And at the same time, our contract transportation through BOCES and private contractors has gone down a bit. So there's an offset there.
And then on top of that one, maybe just look into A 2850, the co-curricular instructional salaries, the 2021.
Yeah.
In the budget, it was 96, and it looks like 21-22, we're up to 218. and just maybe just,
It's funny you mentioned that. Deb and I were just having a conversation about that this afternoon. So that's another area that we're going to look a little closer at. We ended up putting in all of the possible clubs, activities, the stipends for all of the teachers, and it came out to the $220-something thousand. But like I said to Deb, I think we need to look at it and say, what's the probability, and assign probability values and come up with a calculation. Because we've only spent over the last, since I've been here, we've never spent more than $100,000
right.
on any of those stipends.
And it's just such a big dramatic jump. It's just something we got to look at that again.
Yeah, Dave,
Yeah, remember, Dave, we didn't have
that one also, the 2850, which was 30,000 more, and Deb's answer was intramurals. But
Yes.
so for 2855, where even in a full year in 2019, 2020, we only spent 94,000, and that
Right.
was, and now it's at 170. So that seems like a big jump considering past practice on a couple of those things.
It's up to 170, you said?
Remember, last year we lost 2 sports seasons. We lost the second winter and we lost the spring.
In 2019, 2020?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
That was the March 20 was when we went out for the pandemic.
Right. So maybe on some of those numbers, can you, I think it only offered the 2019, 2020 year before, maybe go back another year and see what the kind of spending for that was before that?
Yes. That's what we should be looking at.
Well, you also have to remember that we have an increase in extracurricular and intramural and other, activities than we did even 2 years ago. So
You did school play, Tim, and you
school
did
play, yeah. You had school musical, and then of course the continuation of the opera. But then you had, I think you also included, you added a lot of different things, robotics and so forth and so on.
Yeah.
We'll get you an itemized list of those from 2018-19.
Okay.
Hey, Mike, out of curiosity, that snow removal. I mean, I look over here at Mahoney, who, does our fields and everything, and he's at 44. And then snow removal, you got budgeted at 25. It looks like you had it at that number. Is that really what we're at with snow removal and salt?
This past winter, Della Pola came, and not just snow removal, but whenever we had icy conditions, they came and spread salt down in all the roadways, parking areas, and things like that. Our custodians only do the sidewalks. So every time they would send a truck over, it was pretty hefty chunk of change because we pay them by the hour. And it went up. It was a little over 20. This winter was a little over $26,000 for their
All that
service.
stuff's annually bidded, right? The landscaping.
We're going to go out for an RFP on all of that again this year. Now I'm going to be doing that probably in the next couple of months. We're right now in the middle of doing the auditors. We put an RFP out for the auditors. I'd have to do the internal auditor and the accounting services, Cullen Danowski Accounting Services. So this is the time frame. We have to kind of update all of those RFPs and get it right.
Dave, you got any other questions there?
No, Mike, you did a nice thorough job. It is, you understand it a lot easier. It makes it not easy to go right down the line and try to figure out when you move numbers from where to where.
Yeah, sometimes the numbers get jumbled up in my head, but usually I have them.
He worked all weekend on crunching numbers. He got us from 3.91 down to 2.61.
6.1.
Yeah, we appreciate that. Yeah, I'll follow up, Mike, with any more specific questions based off of that email I sent the other day. Yep.
I'll take a look at that. I just didn't get a chance yesterday or today to look at it.
No worries.
Pat or Amy, do you guys have any questions? No? Tim? Okay.
Nope. I can also have for the board some of the requirements on the stimulus money that we received. I do have a memo from the state on the Federal American Rescue Plan Act. So I'll put some bullets together for you on that, okay?
Okay, sounds great.
Hey, Mike, I had a quick question.
Yep.
When I'm looking at the debt services for, when I look back at your 5-year budget summary from April 2020,
Yeah,
you had the 21-22 debt services amount at 549, and now I think you might have kind of sort of explained it earlier, but you have it now at, because eventually it all kind of goes up into that $1 million range, but you had it at 549 last April, and you have it for the proposed budget at 726. Is there a reason why those numbers
Well,
kind of
we-
changed? over
last
the-
year, when we did the debt service, the estimate for last year, we were talking about trying to do maybe a ban or a delay to issuance of the debt itself. So then this year, when the rates kept going down and down, I had spoken with Mike Laguercio at Munistat, and we said, I think the rates are at the lowest they're going to be. We might as well grab it while it's hot and get the lowest rates possible, which is what we did. So you're not going to really be able to compare last year's number to this year because the scenario changed.
So you
So
took
we
out a larger
accelerated
amount, right?
Issuing we saved nearly $4 million in interest over the life of the bond by doing it this way.
Well, that sounds good.
I couldn't believe the rates, 1% and then 2%. It was incredible.
Right.
That was
Okay. Christine, thank you also. I got the list from Deb that you had put together of the principals list of things. So thanks for taking the time to do that. And Mike, again, thank you very much. I mean, you've really given us a lot of information. It's all been very thorough, and there's always, you could, and going through the line by line, look at that and have a question about something, and oh wait, there's the second section where it goes into more. Maybe I can find the answer for that. So I was able to answer some of my own questions, but I did have a few. So thanks for.
I apologize. That list, because I tried to compile mine, Deb's, Kerry's, and Christine's, but it was so large that I was trying to hide columns that you didn't, or rows you didn't need. And I think I inadvertently hid some rows that you should have seen. So I'm in the process of redoing it for you so you have a more complete list.
All right. Well, thank you very much. So are there anything else for the board to talk about amongst ourselves at this point?
Barbara, does the board want to see any other cuts? Are they comfortable with the 2.61? What do you want us to do going forward to be prepared for our last superintendent's budget meeting on the 26th when the board adopts?
Well, it sounds like, already Mike mentioned he's going to take a look at some things. I'm going to circle back to see if there's any other opportunities. But I mean, he's
you
done a
always
great job so far, but
Yeah, we're always hopeful to get a little bit lower, Mike, but you've taken it quite a distance, more than I thought you would be able to. So we just continue to look at it and ask you questions. But, by the time we get to the next meeting, I'm sure that you'll find something that could lower it a little bit more than that.
Well, you guys are tough.
We're going to be doing grants tomorrow, Mike and I, looking at, what we can put into grants and getting approvals. We do have some amendments that have to go in. So we'll be working on that tomorrow.
And of course, so thinking of how grants work, then we still have to have that amount in the budget because you have to spend that and then you get the grant. Plus, on the other hand, we don't want to make our budget too low and
Well,
have an issue
keep in mind-
years from now.
Keep in
Correct.
mind, we've got two funds we're talking about here. You got the general fund, which is supported by the tax levy. The grants go in a special aid fund, which is a separate fund altogether.
Right.
So what we're looking at is getting the revenue in the special aid fund and then reclassing any expenses that we can into the special aid fund to help the general fund.
Right.
So that's the trick here, the seesaw.
And
So
some of the new money has not been approved, so we have to submit actual grants to get it approved.
Yeah. Right now,
Did
the
we
only
ever
thing
get a
approved,
money from the town for our septic system?
I'm working on that. I haven't had a chance to finish it off, but I've got everything I need, so I've got to put the package together and get it over to the town.
Okay.
I just about a week ago, or a little over a week ago, I got the final, the test results on the septic system from the company that does the testing, the water testing.
Okay.
And remember, Monday, next Monday, we're meeting at 6 PM with BBS, executive session to go over, our contract obligations, where we are financially, and what else needs to be done, kind of like a bullet list.
Right. And that's
So-
just a meeting with them. There's not a public meeting after that, correct?
No, right. You have some contractual obligations in there that you need to discuss with BBS and Park East. And Dave was on the call today. They will be prepared.
Okay, great. So if the board doesn't have any more questions at this time regarding the budget, then we can open this up to the public in case anybody's watching and has questions about the budget at this time. And the phone number is right there on the screen if anybody wants to call in.
We do have a caller waiting when you're ready.
But we're ready.
Okay. So give me a second, please. Caller, give me a second. And phone number ending in 8764. Go ahead, please.
Good evening, school board. This is David Buda. I have a number of things I'd like to comment on, but I'd like to take it one at a time. And then if there are other people that have comments, I'll just wait my turn for the second and third questions. My primary focus, and I think that of the taxpayer, is going to be understanding the financial impact of the budget. I have in front of me last year's budget newsletter. And I first want to remind you that for my particular instance, for the last 2 years running, and possibly 3 years running, this budget newsletter never arrived in my post office box. I'm not in my mailbox, which they now have a little standalone box system for us. So I hope that you found some way to improve the distribution and certainty that everyone who should be receiving this will get it. In the past, you've used distribution to postal patrons instead of individualized mail addresses. So I know I didn't get it. I know other people didn't get it. Of course, I knew where to find it and go and retrieve it, but I'm concerned about the people that just don't get it, and whether you've done anything, whether you'll do anything this year better than in the past. That's a general comment.
David, a quick question there. Do you get other mailings from the school? If other things get sent out, do you get them?
Last year there was I guess you would call it a budget scorecard.
Right.
I received that one, and there was one mailing that was so small that you couldn't read it. I got that one. So it's hit and miss, but the budget newsletter, which is the most important thing as far as I'm concerned, it's really your way of communicating with the taxpayers meaningfully, and it would be a shame if it's not properly distributed through the most efficient means. So let me continue.
Thanks for pointing that out. Yep.
Probably the most important part of that newsletter is a box labeled Estimated Tax Impact of Tax Levy Budget, sort of what you were discussing tonight with your business administrator under tax levy estimates. In the past, you've used 4 different relative values of property, not just 3, and I would suggest you continue to use those 4 values, but I suggest that you add a 4th column. Instead of just having home values, assessed values, and the estimated tax increase, you should have a column that shows the estimated school tax that is charged to each homeowner that owns a property in that value range or value amount. That's really the most important number, more so than just the increase, but the actual school tax that's levied upon a property owner that owns a property of a certain value. So that's a suggestion. Number two, Mike, when you started doing your numbers, you probably didn't have the 2021 residential assessment ratio in front of you. It probably had not been determined. But I would suggest that since most people don't know or understand what an assessed value is, because in a town that has never done a town-wide reassessment, to have a residential assessment ratio of 0.58% creates a number that has no rational relationship to the value of one's property. So I'm going to suggest that you use the four following categories. And this is a broad enough range that will encompass Barbara's house as well. That you should use fair market values or equalized full values, however you want to term it, or just call it house value. And the four values I'd suggest that you use would be 500,000, 750,000, 1 million, and 1.5 million. And those correspond to assessed values of 2,900, 4,350, 5,800, and 8,700. The column that people are going to look at is house value, not assessed value. So if you have nice round numbers, their eyes won't go bleary, and they'll understand it. And if you have the increase, estimated increase, and the estimated school tax, then you are really communicating fully and meaningfully with your taxpayers. So that's topic number one. And I'll happily yield to anyone else that might be waiting with a question, but I do have some comments with regard to enrollment and the impact of enrollment on the budget.
David, thank you very much. I was just going to point out, we usually have our 3-minute limit on people calling in, but I'll just check if Matt has any other callers on the line there. So has anyone else called in, Matt?
As of right now, you have 0 other callers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So if you have another question, David, why don't you go ahead?
Okay. I was pleased to see, now that we have, as part of one of these presentations, the enrollment, projected enrollment, I do see that you are not replacing the 2 teachers that have retired, and with the exclusion of the pre-K, where you seem to suggest that you need a second section, but I understand pre-K is still off-site, so I'm not sure why you're even looking at that. But you have a net decrease of those 2 teachers, and that certainly is appropriate in light of the fact that the enrollment continues to year by year decrease. Now, that raises the next question. I've looked at the state numbers, which were released in January, and I've compared, and that was based on the beds data that the school supplies from October, I believe. And
Yes.
yet, I don't understand that the discrepancy between the state data, which is posted and available for the public, and the numbers that are in this document. There's a discrepancy of 35 students. You're showing a current enrollment from PK through grade 8 of 676, and the state is showing 641. 641 versus 676, a discrepancy of a difference of 35. Now, perhaps it's because some students disenrolled and became homeschooled. Perhaps there's some other abnormalities or anomalies that would explain that. And the most hard to understand aspect of the enrollment is the special ed classes, the ungraded special ed classes. You have 4 categories of special ed classes. The state uses 3, but still the bottom line is, if you look at PK through 8, the state says that you had you reported having 641 students this year, and you're reporting 676. So that's a discrepancy that I'm sure can be explained, and I'd appreciate it be explained. And if it can't be done easily and quickly, then perhaps the superintendent can just send me an email and explain the discrepancy. But the good news is that there are less students. There's no need to replace those 2 teachers that retired. There are less students at the high school, and yet your tuition expenditure is expected to increase. Your wages for teachers is expected to increase, even though you have 2 less teachers. And there's one assumption in your budget numbers that I think is unrealistic, and that is you are projecting forward every year the state's going to give you an additional large amount of additional aid, such as it's doing this year, which is an extraordinary circumstance. I believe the approximately $450,000 increase in state aid that you're anticipating should not be considered forever in the future, and yet you're projecting that number will continue, and I don't know if that's realistic. So I wish someone would comment on that.
I think you might have missed out on part of the conversation, David, where we were talking about the fact that we knew that we could not be counting on those monies for an extended period of time. So I think they're very cognizant of that. And so, thank you for your questions. And in terms of answering them, Deb, do you have a quick answer regarding our enrollment?
Yes, we actually do have, on our enrollment is about 14 students that are being remotely taught. So they're in that number, okay, because we expect them to be back. And then there are about 30 some odd students, maybe 34, that are being homeschooled that right now we're calling to ensure that they are coming back. That 34 would not have been on the beds number because you have to physically be in the school. And the 14 that are being taught remotely, many of those just went out on remote as the crisis got worse. Their parents didn't feel comfortable. In the beginning, there were only about 5 that were on remote. So I can count for all the numbers of our students. And, as you said, Mr. Buddha, we are not replacing 2 retirees.
And with regard to the state aid numbers, yes, it looks like it went up by 400, but keep in mind last year's state aid number that we used in the budget, we deliberately reduced it by about a little over 20%, because that's what the governor was threatening that he was going to, and he had a pandemic adjustment of about 249,000 to reduce us from the higher number down to 1,289,000. And then for this year, we did get increases in our excess cost aid and our BOCES aid to the tune of excess cost aid increased by 165,000. The BOCES aid increased by 71,000, and the foundation aid increased by almost 24,000. So when you take the difference between last year's pandemic adjustment of 248, almost 249,000, and add those 3 other items, our aid increased by about 519,000. It's not a one-time adjustment that's going to carry out. It's bringing us back from a depressed aid number to a more realistic aid number based on the final aid runs that just came out.
All right, so then you're comfortable with an anticipation in your revenue projection of approximately 1.9 million each year in state aid for the next 3,
In state
4,
aid,
5
yes,
years.
I am.
Okay, and for the superintendent, thank you for explaining the enrollment discrepancy. I thought there would be some explanation, but it's certainly not obvious to someone who just looks at the numbers.
Right. No, it's not. And I feel like as we've looked at those enrollment reports every month, someone on the board always speaks up and said, oh, does that include the 30 students who are out being homeschooled or whatever? So we have actually been discussing that through the course of the year, and we have all been aware that, the numbers definitely look a little different this year due to all of our students not being able to be with us. So thank you again for your points. I know I've made some notes, as I saw Deb doing and Mike, regarding your suggestions for the newsletter, and we will review those certainly. So thank you very much for calling in, David. Matt, is there anybody else on the line?
Yeah, I must say too, Dave, I think your idea about the 4 using 500 million, 750 million, I think those are good ideas, and I'm going to talk to Deb about maybe incorporating them in this year's budget newsletter.
Thank you. Just make sure I get my copy.
I'm going to make sure you get several.
Great. Thanks again, David. Have a good night. Matt, has anyone else called in at this time?
We have 0 additional callers. Thank you.
Okay. All righty. Or Deb, anything left to go over?
Nope.
Do some, so we'll do some post-budget hearing follow-up. Dave, I know you have some questions. If anyone else has, we'll reach out to Mike, see if we can shave a little more off, Tim. And and think about that budget newsletter and all that. So everyone still has work cut out for them on terms of this, right?
We certainly do.
Yeah. So anyway, thank you very much for you guys been doing a great job with this and really bringing us up to speed with all our questions. That's very much appreciated. And if I believe it's time to ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting. Okay, nobody wants to adjourn the meeting.
I'll make a motion.
Nobody-
Okay, do I have a
For
second?
a second, I was thinking everybody was enjoying this meeting so much he didn't want it to end.
We all felt it.
Did I have a second? I didn't hear that.
Second.
Okay, great, thank you. All right,
Good night,
and all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.